Leslie Caron, tell me a little bit about your childhood, please, where you were born.
My grandparents were natural-born builders. They loved to build houses. It was very fashionable in the 20s and 30s. So they built an estate in the Pays Basque and a beautiful little villa in Neuilly, which is on the rich outskirts of Paris, by the river. And it was the grand life, like in the 19th century. Butler, cook, chauffeur, everybody had a private car, etc. I mean, and then we used to go in procession to the south of France, to the Pays Basque. And that's where I was born with my brother, Amory, who is now a scientist. And he does something quite remarkable. He lives in the Virgin Islands and tries to find the background of all those black people who came as slaves. And he finds where they come from. And I think that's so touching.
When were you first aware that you wanted to dance or to entertain?
Well, my mother used to be on the stage when she was a bit older than my father. And during a holiday, she came to Paris, La Grande Ville, and met my grandparents' family, who also loved La Grande Ville, gave lots of receptions, and so on and so forth. And she seduced my father, who was 5 years younger. My family disapproved enormously because she smoked, and she had shown her thighs on the stage. She'd been a dancer on Broadway, so that was a no-no. However, they had to lump it, and she married my father, and we were very happy.
When was it you first thought that you wanted to dance or to entertain?
Well, my mother never stopped talking about Pavlova and Nijinsky, les Ballet Russes. She talked about nothing but. She also taught herself French beautifully, was interested in French literature all the way to the Revolution. She said after that, it's a bore. And she also taught herself Russian.
What was your relationship like with your mother?
Well, she was more interested in books and playing bridge. She used to give me the money she earned at bridge to buy toe shoes during the war. Apart from that, she said children bored her. She said, when you're a star, I'll be there.
So is that why you became a star?
Of course. Of course. She found the best school for me. And she said, well, get on with it. I'm not going to come like those mothers every day and watch you, you know, just get on with it. And I did, and she'd come once a year, and she said, not quite good enough.
So when you became a star, did you regain your mother's affection, do you think?
She refused the first contract that was offered to me, because by then I was in Roland Petit's company. And that was very, very glamorous. It was the best company in Europe, maybe in the world in those days.
But she turned down the contract.
So she turned down the first contract. Second one was Gene Kelly, MGM, the leading part. So she said, okay, that'll be good. And she said, but you know, you've got to look at Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire has the best timing of any dancer. And when I met Fred Astaire and he wanted to work with me. I made a point of not telling him that as a little girl my mother had said, watch Fred Astaire for timing. He's the best.
Let's go back a little in time. How was your lifestyle, your grand lifestyle, affected by the Nazi invasion of Paris?
No food, no heat, no water most of the day. There was electricity and water a certain time of the day. You had to quickly fill up. I remember going to bed completely dressed up except for the shoes. The coat, the scarf, the bonnet, everything. It was so cold during that first winter.
The Germans entered Paris. Drama, history. The day of Hitler's greatest triumph. The day when all the world except the British Empire thought it must be London next.
In Paris, it was desperately difficult. We ate fodder for animals. I remember the queues for everything. It became a way of life. The French became addicted to queuing. Even after the war was way over, it was a habit, even for the newspaper, until the government put out a law. Queuing is forbidden.
What was it like amongst French people during the Nazi occupation? How did you relate to each other? Did you...
Nasty.
Nasty?
Yes.
Why?
I think the French felt guilty. I think the French know they didn't have the courage to say no to the invader. They waited much too long to start preparations for the war. As soon as Hitler was building up roads and tanks, that's when you have to build up, if only to show that you're going to be ready in case. But the French, life was too good. And people were bitter with each other, rude. You couldn't ask the time of day. You couldn't ask how to get here and there, where such and such a street was. People wouldn't answer you. It was unbelievably hostile.
Were you aware of the Holocaust?
No. I did notice the stars on the left side.
That Jewish people were forced to wear?
Yes. And little by little, you saw less and less stars, people with stars. And then, finally, you saw none. And we had a dressmaker who was called Rosa. And she, of course, I suppose, was Jewish. And one day I said to my father, Papa, why doesn't Rosa come and do our clothes anymore? And he said, oh, she had a problem with her passport. That's all I was told. Us children took war as a joke. It was another game for us. We used to make nasty phone calls to people, taking a German accent. Then one day at ballet school, there was a girl with big numbers tattooed on her arm. And one day I said something in front of this girl, and she opened her sweater and showed us her arm. I never did that again.
You understood what it meant?
Yes. I think by then we knew what the numbers meant.
You've mentioned ballet school. When did you start ballet school?
I was about 11, very undernourished, skinny little shrimp. It was extremely hard. My mother said to my family, listen, if she's going to be a ballet dancer, she has to learn every day. You don't take that up once a week, like young ladies of good society do. You do it every day if you're going to be anything good.
Do you remember the liberation?
Oh boy, yes, I do. Amory and I, we said we were going out in the streets. Everybody was, I mean, millions of people in Paris, each one holding a bottle, kissing, hugging. It just was insanely joyous.
Who is here?
That is the great French dancer, Jean Babillet. So he was as good as Nijinsky. As a matter of fact, he danced most of the same parts and many others. He jumped and stayed up there for a bit.
Amazing.
Before coming down. He did this fabulous ballet, Le Jeune Homme et la Mort, Young Man and Death, which was such a success in London. He hung himself at the end of the ballet, and it was so dramatic. The room lifted, and you saw all the chimneys of Paris and the roofs of Paris. It was beautiful. And he walked like a dead man, you know. And when he hung himself, people held their breath.
Of course.
It looked so real. Thank God. He had a wood peg in the back that he held on to. Yeah. But there was a rope there, and every night I thought, oh my God, he's going to miss it.
And hang himself for real, my goodness.
Yes.
What was your first starring role in Paris?
Well, immediately, Roland Petit, when he saw me, he came to the same class I was going to. That's one thing about ballet. Everybody goes to the same class. When you're a beginner, you stand in the back and try to do as good as the ones in the front. So I was in the same class, and one day there was this miraculous, godlike young man with, you know, attitude, grand attitude. And Madame kissed him and hugged him, and he was Roland Petit. And after the bar, he came to me, he said, "You, what's your name?" And I had decided to call myself Caronova, Russian name, because, of course, all the dancers my mother used to talk about were Russian. So I told the truth. I said, Leslie Caron. And he said, okay, come and see me in my office at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. I want you in my company. I came rushing home and said to my mother, she said, oh, good. And she said, you go there by yourself. So I went, and he hired me on the spot to do a little solo as a clown, dressed by Christian Dior. It was orange with puffed out thighs here in satin, glittered, and here was a sun, and in the back was a moon in tinsel. And so the number, the ballet was called 13 danses, 13 dances. And so I went through my little number. I did my 2 turns, and I had this to do, and I thought, oh God, I've ruined it. I wobbled. Gosh, I'd better go home. This is it. I've ruined the ballet. I've ruined Roland. And I nearly went, and I thought, well, the music is continuing. Maybe I'd better continue. So I finished the number. And then there was a thunder of applause. I couldn't understand this really like rain was beating on the theatre. Oh, the first time I'd heard that, it was so thrilling. There we are. That was the first.